Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith along with
Ivan Ozerets.
Ivan Ozerets, episode 216. Today we're going to talk about the late Robert Lansdorp. But before we do, one announcement. Appreciate everyone's patience. The website was down for a better part of a week.
It was, yes, we were trying to make updates, some changes, so it's up now. So thank you for your patience, everybody.
One thing with GreatBase Tennis, our mission, giving out free educational content. We've done some homework. I've been teaching tennis now. I've been a student of the game for 50 years. So we feel like we have something that's worth sharing, and the price is right. The price is free. On the website, give us a roll. What's on the website?
5 free educational courses. The podcast is up on the website. Links to our social medias, Facebook and Instagram. We have a resources tab with book recommendations, manuals, Joel Trucker's brain typing worksheet. We have Paul Wardlaw's book. In addition, we have a Journey to the Truth manuscript, 79-ish pages long, depending on the TypeScript. Also, there's a donation page where you can donate to our cause, our mission to improve quality and quantity of the content that we provide online.
The Laver Cup. I know that's a few days in the past. Like Roger Federer, I think it's a class act. I think it's really well done. Did you have a chance to watch much?
Watched a little bit of it. Yes. I mean, it was, someone wrote a script for it. The last team Europe was down and world was winning. Then Zverev pulled out the match in 3 sets, and then Alcaraz managed to beat Fritz in the final match, the final singles match. And it was a good ending. You're always hoping for that last. They have a cool system where if it's 12-all, then they play a 1 set deciding doubles.
And they've never had to do that. 7 years in. No, I heard John Isner talking about that. The Laver Cup, of course, I think a lot of times people will make the mistake that I'm going to make right now instead of just saying it's great, it's great, it's great. If I were to say one thing, is the doubles. They do have marquee players playing doubles. But whether it was some of the Davis Cup matches, some of the matches from the Olympics, I think they really should bring in some of the double specialists, because it's gone so many years now. Some of the pros, when they step up and they play singles, it's exciting, it's entertaining, but if you're a student of the game, it's not good doubles. Yeah. But here's a thought for you, a question. McEnroe and Borg as captains, they're stepping down after 7 years. Agassi will be coaching Team World, and Yannick Noah, one of the coolest people in tennis, will be coaching Team Europe. Mm-hmm. And I think what they should do is have Steffi Graf be the Yannick Noah, his vice captain for Team Europe. Be interesting to see who the assistants are. I think one highlight was I'd love to listen to Agassi. I know he sat with you at one point where Agassi's commentating. What are your thoughts on that?
It's great. I mean, he should commentate more. I mean, he's very soft-spoken, but just listening to him commentate, you're like, this guy knows a lot. There's the way he talks about just every part of the game. It's very unique, you can tell it's a different voice. You don't hear commentating like that very often. And so you listen, you're like, oh, who's this? Oh, it's Agassi. Oh, very, very interesting. And he just says different things and frames certain parts of the game. And the way he talks about it is educational. It's very,
as McEnroe says, very analytical. McEnroe said that he was emotional and Agassi would be analytical as a coach. He did, like so many people, he got out of his lane a little bit when he started, some of the things he was saying. If you study the science of tennis, you just know, they're not keeping the ball on the strings longer.
Yeah. That was, had to turn a blind ear to a couple of things he was saying. He, the how long the ball's on the strings. I think I made the comment to you. It's like, well, if one of the commentators stepped up and asked, how long is the ball on the strings? What would be the discussion after that?
I heard one person say it's because he grew up in Vegas too, where the house wins and what are the odds and play the percentages. the poker mind. I don't even know if he's a poker player, but I thought it was interesting just how Jim Courier was listening intently.
Mm-hmm.
And, you hear people say that, he's the best commentator. One of the first times I heard Agassi, and this is, I understand how Darren Cahill got his job, because when Agassi retired, Cahill was his coach, and they really wanted Agassi to do TV. And he said, again, this is hearsay, I don't know this to be factual, but Agassi said, well, why don't you hire Darren and then I'll substitute, which he really hasn't been that much of a substitute. I think Cahill's done very, very well as a commentator. But, Cahill wasn't, he's not a marquee player. Usually it's the people who've won the majors. I mean, obviously he's a great player, and he had coached Hewitt from a really young age, and certainly coached Agassi. But first time I heard Agassi, he was talking about Roddick. Roddick was new on the scene, and he said, I would die for his serve. He goes, I've never got a free point in my serve. And he basically had 2 second serves. It's interesting, though. I mean, Federer had more problems with Agassi's serve than he did Roddick's. Mm-hmm. But, he didn't get free points. But then they said, well, what about Andy's forehand? And he said, it's too complicated. He said it takes him too long to get in the pocket. So he basically said he didn't like his forehand. And then he later, Roddick's playing, he said all great backhands, racket hits above the wrist. And then the sidekick, the color commentator assisting him said, well, what about Andy? Because he takes the racket low and pulls it outside in. And Agassi said, well, the horse has been out of the barn a long time. Meaning that he would change the backhand. I mean, it'd be better if it was high to the high and inside out. And along those lines, I like to quote the players. Like Andy Roddick was once asked, what about Roger Federer? He's an artist. He's a technician. I just hit the crap out of the ball. And then also when Roddick was being inducted to the International Tennis Hall of Fame, he's on the stage and at the podium. And he said, well, I feel comfortable, even though I may be the worst player that's ever been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I feel pretty good because Jim Courier's sitting behind me, and he had a crappy backhand too. I think I've heard Roddick say, I couldn't even hit topspin on my backhand. But no, with the Labor Cup, I think it's outstanding. I think that it's great for tennis. People say it's a great event after the U.S. Open, that it's a team event, but yet you hear what the players say about it. They step up and they compete. Mm-hmm. Getting back to our topic, Robert Lansdorp, American Treasure. I think one thing, if any, people go to our content, and we have a YouTube clip called the Lansdorp 20. And, we do it in a little different manner. We build up to the drill itself. And just like we tell people in tennis, it'd be great every day if developmental coaches were to have players play one bounce doubles. We a lot of times do it where there's no poaching. Serve, come in, all the players converge on the net. And with that, we see these young kids playing, they're using the I formation as, just learn to serve and volley. Just bread and butter, vanilla, simple. But the Lansdorp 20, it's feeding ground strokes, and you have to hit balls over the service line in 20 in a row. And if you get to 19 and you miss, you start again at 0. And we'll talk about that. But actually, in the clip that we put up, our critics, it's great to have critics. To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. So the young kids that are on the court, one went on to win the National 12s, the Orange Bowl, and the La Petits. And I read this, I went back and looked at it, and someone also said that one of the student assistants went on and directed the tennis camp at Harvard. But just the other day, I talked to Jose Garcia. He's the youngest kid on the court, and he plays for the University of Tennessee, Lansdorp 20. And the nice thing about Jose, this comes off the Lansdorp 20 drill that we have as a educational video, that once his family, once he was brought to work with me, his two older brothers, and that really helped him so much being the youngest. The two older brothers paved the way, hitting partners and, setting the example and, experiencing tournament play and those things from the get-go. But they never went to a pro or a program after that. And he's at University of Tennessee. So I once was in Knoxville with Austin Krajicek and Paul Annacone, a great player, like a Cahill, not somebody who won majors, but he was number one in the world in doubles. When you talk about experiences he has playing Connors in the quarters at Wimbledon, I mean, big time tennis. But it is pretty much straight across the board from country to country. The people that are with a microphone have won majors. So the boys were working with Steve Annacone, Paul's older brother, in Knoxville. So I met with Steve Annacone, and he said, I don't disagree with anything these guys are doing. But he goes, I just want to know, how'd you get them to do it? Because they went back to Knoxville, and they're, the typical thing, shadow swinging and going up to the fence and tracing the swing and drop hitting balls and tossing balls to each other. And I said, well, there's a lot of different ways, but one, you have to film. Two, you have to skill test. And on and on and on. But that's one thing you can do is go look at that video online, Lansdorp 20. We'll talk more about it. I've done some homework here, I have some notes with, and of course, where Robert was working is where you grew up in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And Southern California tennis today is outstanding, but it's not like it used to be. I think in 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down, tennis exploded in Eastern Europe. And when Lansdorp came over to the United States, his first day at the Kramer Club was April 2nd, 1970. Heard in this interview, we're going to play excerpts from it. He didn't want to start on April 1st, April Fool's Day. But at that time, California was a tennis nation. It used to be in the 1970s, safe bet that in the men's draw at Wimbledon, there'd be 70 players from the United States. Now tennis is global. It wasn't really a global sport. Now you go back to, like, one of the things with the success of Harry Ottman in the 50s and 60s with the Australians, a lot of the Aussies, they went straight to tennis. They didn't go to college, but the Americans went to college, like a Stan Smith and an Arthur Ashe. They went to college. They were in the service when they were in college, and it was a deferment. It was a way for American tennis players, American young men in the States at that time, not to go to war. But I'll start with my notes here. With Lansdorp, born 1938, died just here recently, September 16th of this month, 2024, by the time this podcast comes out. Just a few weeks ago. I think to start with two quotes, Robert Lansdorp asked how he was so successful. I just worked. I just went to work. Another is if you don't have discipline, you don't have anything. And just like when another American tennis treasure passed away, Vic Braden, there's not as much as there should be on the internet about Vic Braden. Certainly more with his educational tapes than there is with Lansdorp. But I've listened to so much. I think there's so many things that are up, but the quality of the sound is not the best. He's best known for working 4 players over 4 decades, 4 different decades. Tracy Austin, Pete Sampras, Lindsay Davenport, Maria Sharapova were all number ones. USTA, which he was very critical of, gave him the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2005. He has been nominated for the International Tennis Hall of Fame. I would hope that he would get in. Again, I think a bare minimum for people to just understand the way he spoke to people. And certainly it's great. You can listen to, I have this in my notes, Tracy Austin talking about Robert Lansdorp. I've got in my notes comments from Pete Sampras. For myself, meeting Robert Lansdorp, I mean, I was on a mission. I was in Southern California, and I had made the rounds, but it was like, okay, I need to work for Braden. So there's certainly a connection between Lansdorp and Braden. There's a lot to be said about that. So when I first went out to Koto, Koto de Casa, where Vic was based. I went through his course, and 6 months later, when he offered the course again, I was there. I was there to stay and work basically as a volunteer. So when Vic would travel, I would travel, and I would travel all over Southern Cal. And I traveled to observe Robert Lansdorp. And those people who knew him personally, this his voice. So I go to this club, and there's a turnstile. You can't get in. You can't just walk in. So there's a woman at the desk, and I said, I'd like to talk to Robert Lansdorp. And he's on the court. So he's paid from the tennis court. And this is an example of how you slay the dragon. So I go, oh no. So he's on the tennis court. He's being pulled off the tennis court. And the way it was set up too at the tennis club, he was a long ways away. He was on one of the back courts, which where he liked to be. He wasn't one who was putting up banners with his name on it, and just in a lot of ways, not really marketing himself. So he enters the lobby, and he looks at me, and he's a big guy posing, and he just goes, "Who the hell are you?" Just the way he said it. "Who the hell are you?" And I introduced myself, and to slay the dragon, I said, which was true. I had been a hitting partner for Tim Gullickson when the late Tim Gullickson was working with Vic. And Tim he had worked with Robert. And I said that Tim told me that you're the greatest tennis coach in the world. And if I ever had a chance to observe you, I needed to, do what I'm doing right now, is asking for permission to just watch you give lessons. So I was in, and of course, you're from Southern Cal, and that was many years ago now, but it seems like it takes 45 minutes just to go to the grocery store in Southern California. Car city. So the first lesson, and I stayed for several lessons that first day. He was working with Elliot Telscher. Telscher got to be 6th in the world. He was a really good tennis player, same age as McEnroe. And I've got some notes about Telscher as we go on, but I one time was giving a workshop, and Telscher came to it in Southern Cal, training coaches, and talked about inner voice. And I said to Elliot, when you agree that the way Robert spoke to you when you were a kid, he really helped you with the inner voice. He goes, what do you mean the way he talked to me as a kid? He talks to me the same way today. To me, Rocky Balboa, who the hell are you? With now his tennis background is not typical. He doesn't come from the country club. He was born in Indonesia. He's Dutch, but he was born in Indonesia. It was under Dutch rule, Dutch East Indies. During World War II, it was occupied by the Japanese. His father was put in a concentration camp, so he was a prisoner of war. And there's many stories of life-threatening situations and running away from gunfire. And shortly after World War II came to an end, Indonesia was fighting for independence. So there was another fight, basically total unrest. And so he returned to Holland in 1945. And that's when he took up tennis. Have to confirm this, but moved to the U.S. in 1960. I would have made him 21 years old, give or take. So you just think, okay, 3 continents, Asia, Indonesia, Europe, Holland, and North America, the USA. This tape there's so many things, but we'll put one tape. What's the gentleman's name? Ken Thomas?
Ken Thomas is his name, correct?
He does, he's radio tennis.
Radio tennis.
No, he does an excellent job. I think it's one of the best pieces of content on Robert. Like, as I said, there's so many that the sound is not so good with. But one of the reasons they moved to Australia is that he talks in the interview where one time his family had 9 dogs, but they had an Irish wolfhound, which is like a small horse. And one of my friends at one time, Mark Costello, he's been a guest on the podcast. He had an Irish wolfhound. Irish wolfhound had its own couch. They don't have very long life expectancy. But they were going to go to Australia, but if you went to Australia with a dog, the dog would have to be in quarantine for 9 months. But there was no quarantine period for the U.S., so they came to the U.S. Moved to San Diego and won a tournament. Back in the day, many times you just win one tournament. It could even be the college hosting the tournament. Now, in this case, Pepperdine wasn't hosting the tournament, but he beat the number 1 player at Pepperdine. So really out of nowhere, he was offered a scholarship. It wasn't tennis back in those days. It wasn't like people were traveling all over. It was so different. So he did go to Pepperdine. It's interesting, when he was at Pepperdine, it was in LA, it was in Malibu. But he left early, and then he was working at a club, and then he left that club. He calls it club politics. But when they first came over, they went to San Diego, beautiful San Diego, and he used to practice at Morley Field. And he said just because he loved to hit balls, he practiced with Karen Hance, who won Wimbledon in 1962. And because of that, he said he got a call out of nowhere, because he had just left his club. So how's it go? Where one door closes and another opens. So if anybody's been to San Diego, the public park right across from the zoo, but he was there in his 20s and he had success, and he thanks the Redondo family, the famous tennis family, that really helped him with credibility. If you look at just photos, I mean, he was certainly his presence, tall, good-looking guy, athletic. He says that McEnroe, that's how good Walter Redondo was. Is McEnroe said when he beat him, that's when he first thought he was a tennis player. But so then he was asked, when Braden left the Kramer Club, he was asked to go, and he was really a little bit indifferent about leaving the public park and going to a tennis club, because he was more of a public park guy. And if you were around him, you got that sense he was a public park guy. But he definitely inherited championship culture. I mean, they had a players' lounge. I've met so many people that were part of that. Gene Austin. She had 5 kids. Tracy obviously is the most famous, but they were all really good tennis players. 4 played on the tour. And then Doug, who didn't play on the tour, he's an outstanding tennis player. He was good enough to play 1 at Long Beach State. So Vic had been there for 7 years. In a lot of ways, I think it was a perfect scenario where, I remember talking to Elliot Telscher about that, the order of that. And Tracy Austin says that Vic made it so much fun for her when she was so young that maybe it wouldn't have worked if Robert was there first and Vic was there second. But just think about Jeff Austin, who was born in 1951. Connor was born in 1952. They both played at UCLA together. And Vic went to Argentina and was helping coaches, and actually worked with Vilas as coach. And it goes way back. The connection is Vilas and Jeff Austin. Because of that, they won the Orange Bowl doubles. That's where everything has to be confirmed by a fact checker. They definitely played Orange Bowl doubles. My memory is fading, soon to be 70. But the Austin family, just say a few things about the Austin family. Certainly among the first families of tennis in the world. Jeff Lewis, who was a guest not too long ago on our podcast, he was out helping Vic, and you told me the story where this is so many years later that at that time, Brandon Holtz, a very good tennis player, Tracy's son, he's already out of college and on the tour. So, I mean, Gene Austin, that'd be her grandson. So he has to be 20 years old. So a lot of years went by. And, but they were donating or giving old trophies. They're just cleaning out. I mean, there's a famous photo. It was in Sports Illustrated of the Austin family and all these photos behind them. So, you mentioned on the podcast, Big Braden told me that Gene Austin was an ENTJ. That's a CEO, cannot not lead. So, doing my homework here for this podcast is Tracy said that she had to make the phone calls. She made phone calls to have matches each day, and she'd play, other juniors, but she would be calling up Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so. But she didn't start playing tennis until after her fourth child. And I always heard the story about Gladys Heldman started playing when she was 25. Her daughter, Julia, became a really good player. And she started world tennis. I love those stories about people started playing late. I always talk about Bob Carmichael. Started playing tennis when he was 21 in Australia. And 10 years later, he was in the quarterfinals in Wimbledon. So there is a chance for the late bloomer. Vic actually played mixed doubles with Gene Austin. Vic was a very good tennis player. And so it's just interesting. Pam, the oldest daughter, then Jeff, and then John and Doug. John won the NCAA doubles title. Jeff, he was at UCLA. As I mentioned, he was a Jimmy Connors teammate. They won the NCAA doubles title twice. So if Tracy was born in 1962 and Jeff's born in 1951, she said that he was the older brother and he was not too cool for school. She'd come home or he'd come home from the tour and practice with her. With Jeff Austin was famous for saying that the difference between Jimmy Connors and the rest of the players on our team is a walk from the locker room to the court. But Jeff Austin, this has to go way back. So I'm born in 54. I'm a newbie to tennis, but I remember watching Jeff play the Bill Reardon tournament. And it would have been 74, 75, 76. It was, I think, all 3 years. But it was in Boca Raton, and he just hit the ball well. So again, Pam and Jeff and John all play at UCLA. I mean, it's not so easy to play tennis at a big university like that. There's a famous story with Vic Braden. He said he introduced Tracy to Billie Jean King. Said when she was like 8 or 9 years old, said she's going to be a great player. And the next time they met each other, Tracy had beat her in straight sets. It's interesting. Doug, you just dig, and he went to BYU, but initially, but then he transferred back to Long Beach State. That was the day of private lessons. And then listening to Tracy, sometimes she was just getting 1 half-hour lesson a week. They're either 30 minutes or 1 hour. And, actually we developed more players, better players back in the day when you just take one private. But people were hitting the backboard. They're doing baskets. They're feeding each other overheads. They're calling people up for matches. And they're just hanging out. I was once at the US Open with Vic, and Elliot Telscher and John Austin were playing each other. And I remember having a key to his library back in California, and there was a film of those two kids practicing with each other. So I mean, Vic documented everything. So, he had, and later with the help of getting Ariel, he had Tracy Austin on a biomechanical screen sketch from the time she was very young. But Tracy's, she obviously speaks highly of both. If you look at film of Robert, you can dig on YouTube, and he's got a player at the service line. He's dropping the ball for like a 6-7-year-old. And they have this high follow through, vertical finish. And they stop it. The player stops and it freezes at the top, like they're shaking hands with a giant. I just know so many people look at that and just be so critical. And we're always saying, don't judge the unfinished product. But back in the day, I don't think it was so much where people were marketing, well, this is my secret sauce. That's what was great about watching Lansdorp teach tennis. He didn't have secret sauce. So watching Elliot Telscher take a lesson, at that time he's already, he's well on his way to be a millionaire. Just one of his hobbies, I remember he told me, he just went to look at houses. And, so I'm about the same age. And the next lesson comes out, could be an 11-year-old kid. And it's the same thing, same voice, same basics, principles. Why do you do this? Why don't you play an excerpt from that?
Yeah, of course.
Just to hear the tone of his voice. Who the hell are you?
Yeah, all the credit goes again to Ken Thomas, Radio Tennis. So thank you for providing this interview. So let's listen.
In a way, I kind of like the way they call matches over there in England. It's not a wall of sound. I mean, they'll be quiet for a while,
Let me tell you something. I've been complaining about this. I have no idea what is wrong with these people. And then actually, I have quite a few ex-students that are in television,
right?
And they should know better.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether it's the producer that makes these people talk. I watched the match that played in Wimbledon in 2000, so 20 years ago. It was Sampras against I don't know who I don't know. Maybe it was Federer. Yeah. And it was done by either English people or it was Australian people. I don't know who were announcing it. They didn't say. They only talked when the people weren't playing. When the play was going on, there was just no sound, but you could hear the ball and you could watch the match. You could get into the match, in other words. Yeah. These people talk and they can't keep their mouth shut. So what I wanted to do, this is what I wanted to do. I want to find out who is the guy or woman responsible for letting these people talk during the point and telling me what I'm already seeing. Tell me something different. I already see what you're doing. You have to keep your mouth shut, okay? So I want to find out who the person is that tells these people to talk during the point. And I'm going to follow them and watch them till they go to the movies, okay? And when they go to the movies, I'm going to go with my girlfriend and I'm going to sit right behind the guy.
Yeah.
Right behind the guy. And then when the movie starts, I'm going to tell my girlfriend exactly what I see in the movie. I'm going to tell it loud. And I'm going to wait. How long is it going to take for this guy to turn around and tell me to shut up?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's ridiculous how much they talk.
Yeah, it is.
Just give me some really, and they don't talk technical stuff either. They just talk BS. That's all they do. Yeah. They have to stop doing that. I mean,
Robert Lansdorp. We have a podcast on television tennis. The tone of his voice, you could definitely hear that. With, keep your mouth shut. I don't think Robert was really big on small talk. I mean, obviously, if you were in his inner circle, which I was not, this is in my notes. Jump ahead. 1985. I just happened to be teaching tennis in Germany. I wasn't a coach, but I was, with the Davis Cup team because Robbie Seguso didn't have a coach. His brother Roger, we were just hanging around guys, and we have this beautiful suite in a hotel. It's amazing how many dignitaries show up. But Lansdorp was there, and I really didn't say a word until there's another story where I did speak up. I tell this story often with Herb Krickstein, Aaron Krickstein's dad. He was doing most of the talking. Arthur Ashe is so quiet. So anyway, Robert's there as the coach of Telscher. Nick Baltieri's there as the coach of Aaron Krickstein. And they were the two players playing singles. and Seguza Flack were playing the doubles. I had taught tennis in Indonesia, and I did go in enough to watch Robert teach tennis because that was in the early 80s. This is 85, so I know you. And I didn't know my name, but I know you. You're the guy who came to watch me teach tennis. And I remember just saying to him, yeah, Robert, I taught tennis in Indonesia for a month. And all he looked at me and goes, crazy place. But if you listen to Ken Thomas's interview, you'll find out it was a crazy place, crazy times. But let me jump ahead off of that in my notes. I was not at the National Teachers Conference this particular year. I used to go every year. And then I had this long hiatus because for a decade, I was at Tyler Junior College training tennis teachers. This 2-year school in Texas where you get a degree in tennis and such. So I couldn't go. You couldn't go to the Teachers Conference at the beginning of the US Open, but that was when kids were coming in and registering and had to help people just get situated. Their families, the parents would sometimes come and they'd have to find a roommate and on and on and on. So they continue to do their discussion on how to improve American tennis. Now, this is at the USTA National Tennis Conference. Now, that would have been early 80s. So it was 79 when Tracy put all this together chronologically. So Tracy Austin, born in 62, she wins the US Open at 16. I mean, you'll have to play that excerpt on being a traveling coach. He was the first traveling coach in tennis. Tracy played Wimbledon when she was 14. So just honesty. With my son Mikhail here, came to visit a few days ago, and we went to Monticello,
yeah.
Home of Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, the two things you need is humor and integrity. And, Robert Lansdorp, he definitely had locker room humor, but he had integrity in capital letters. So Peter Burwash, Vic Braden, Dennis Vandermeer, Mr. Hopman, he passed away in 84. So he wasn't there. That he would not have been there. But I might be missing a headliner, but it was the Bs. It was Burwash, Braden, and Bollettieri. Welby was never really invited to those things. He should have been. But Lansdorp is up on this table, a panel, there's the word. So there's these conference tables, and they each have microphones like we do. And basically what you just played, it was just like, I can remember just meeting Robert Lansdorp, watching him work for the first time. And I can say the same thing about Hopman or Braden. It was like, whoa, this is big time. So it's his turn, microphone. What's wrong with United States tennis? And again, this is an event being hosted by the USTA, the United States Tennis Teachers Conference. And he basically goes, what's wrong with these people? And he didn't swear, but it was like he did swear. For crying out loud. For freaking, but it wasn't filmed, but I had read the transcript, manuscript. Mm-hmm. And he basically said, what are you thinking? You got these 15-year-old kids, you're investing in their tennis, and they're hanging onto the racket like it's a frying pan. And I just remember that. So, and it was Vic's turn to speak, and Vic started talking about electric myography or brain typing or, because Vic was, the curious cat, the curious intellectual. And people need to understand that you think of Vic Braden, but what Robert Lansdorp, what he brought to the table needed to be done. And that's why that Kramer Club ended up having, it was not just during the Braden years, it was Lansdorp came in, and it was amazing what he did. I told a story with Jeff Lewis. I did so many things with Vic where I can remember the only time I felt like I had a speaking part was Beatlemania. We'd be at the US Open or Indian Wells, and he would just be swarmed by people asking questions. And then they couldn't ask Vic, so they'd ask one of his assistants, which in that case was me. But No, Jeff, I mentioned that. I mentioned again where Jeff Lou set up where Braden and I did a few coaching workshops together. And what I would, then Vic found out, Vic, I do a skills test. I feed him 25 shots and I tell him they're terrible. Your kid can't hit the broadside of a barn, and we film them and we make a take-home tape. And he loved it. He saw the pre-post videos. But with Robert, let me go back to, again, coming back to where he started. But Tracy Austin was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at the age of 13. I know it was. I thank you for printing that. I read that article. It was amazing. 1976, The Star is Born. You can find it on YouTube. It's an amazing article. She actually was on the cover. Speaking of Gladys Heldman, she was on the cover of World Tennis at age 4. And in 1979, she was on the cover of Sports Illustrated again as the champion of the U.S. Open. Coming back to Sports Illustrated, there was recently at the Kramer Club a reunion, a get-together for Vic Braden. And one of the questions, you mentioned our website, Joel Trucker, who it's a great article put together with Vic and John. Vic, it's based on John Nienagel's work, but Joel Trucker and Vic. That was also something that made it to the cover of Tennis Magazine. But one of the questions that was asked in the beginning was Joel Trucker was emceeing this panel, and he asked Frank Giampaolo about tennis being in the Stone Ages. But it was May 10th, 1976. It was a featured article in Sports Illustrated. Vic was just so curious. I mean, he was so successful, had the golden touch, but then he went into coaching at a resort. They're coaching adult college camps because he needed to generate more revenue because he was funding his own research. Here's some Lansdorps with timing is everything. You've got to learn to rally. You still need to go out and rally. Get a practice partner. Can you hit 100 in a row? Love of backboards. Discipline. Repetition. He talks about, growing up on a plantation. Said he was intrigued by watching things grow. And he thinks that had a lot to do with him wanting to be part of tennis players growing. So molding players, repetition. These are, again, Lansdorp pearls. Number one, you need consistency, which at times he calls it concentration. You need consistency, you need placement, and you need power. To come back to concentration, it's like in Tim Galloway's book. If you're watching a movie and you're just totally into the movie, you're just absorbed by the movie, you don't have to slap yourself on the thigh and go, come on, concentrate. And yeah, I just think that is true, that consistency is a great substitute for the word consistent.
Yeah, I got a clip for that, Steve, right here from the podcast. We can listen to it.
Yeah, that's great.
I have a thing that says concentration, placement, and power. Those are the three things you have to be number one.
Say it again.
Concentration, placement, and power.
There you go.
And if you want to lose one, lose the power.
Okay.
If you're very consistent and place the ball well and have a decent, you can do a little bit. Like what's the name? Wozniacki. I mean, Sheldon made it won the Australian.
Yeah.
But if you have to be consistent. And so you have to work from young on to have the confidence to be able to drive the ball hard and be consistent. That's if you have all three of them, you can become number one.
With Wozniacki, use a Jan Tiriak line. We're in Virginia. You could say that she could run from here to Miami. Or she could run from here to New York. And actually, she's back playing now. When she did retire, she was running some marathons. With coming back to our clip of the Lansdorp 20, we do get into how Lansdorp fed a tennis ball where Elliot Telcher says just pure genius. And, it's a sight to behold. I do think that's, to come back to American Treasure, what needs to be captured is how he fed tennis balls. To this day, I remember watching him for the first time. We have one of those tennis mowers where you just push it, and it's a fast way to pick up the balls. He had one that was custom made. I've never seen anything close to how big he had one of those mowers and how many balls were on a tennis court. And he never stopped feeding balls. So corner to corner, and people watch our version of the Lansdorp 20. We're teaching technique, we're teaching balance, but and Robert did all that, obviously. And you could dig that out, coming back to a young kid at the tee line, you just dropping a ball for him. I always think of Welby Van Horn doing that. That's where your first 3 lessons would be, and you wouldn't even hit a ball. But back in those days, there was a ready position, there was a unit turn, there was a backswing, a contact point, a follow through. It just seems like so much of that has gone away. Here again, I think that Lansdorp was a common sense approach. He would sometimes work on an entire lesson, just work on one shot. But it was very normal for him to take 80% of the lesson and just. I did that this morning. I fed 6 baskets to a player who's making a change on his forehand, and I just kept feeding him forehand after forehand after forehand. You just need to put in the reps. More on Lansdorp, keep everything as simple as possible. No fear. He says, and he's was obviously Indonesia to Holland to the U.S., but I think of Robert as a California guy, so he goes all the way over to Florida, Sarasota. He's watching Sharapova, and Sharapova loses, and she's in tears. And it was on the American clay, and he just told her, he goes, "You did great because you had no fear." Just think all kids have a fear of going to the net. You read about Tracy Austin when she was younger. He had no fear of going to the net. I'll tell you about Sharapova. So you read her book, Unstoppable. So she ends up at Bollettieri's. At first, Sharapova is not at Bollettieri's. She goes there and she's not accepted. And trying to think of the name of the player, Bangora, a young tennis player, same age as my son. And Bangora, his father had a tennis academy. And so Sharapova was there short term. You have to read her book, but my understanding, because I was coaching somebody who's very close friends with her at that age, Liberty Secchi. I remember Liberty going to New York to her 18th birthday or 17th birthday, and I got a gift. She came back, and Liberty had a gift for me for the Sharapova party. It was 3 pink tennis balls. They said Sharapova. At her, I think Sharapova 18 or Sharapova 17. But it was a secret. That's how I understand it. It was a secret. I mean, Liberty and her parents, they were at Bollettieri's full time. And Sharapova was there full time, but Sharapova would go missing for 1 week out of the month. I mean, like she'd be gone for 5-6 days. And my understanding is also that IMG was funding that, is that they were paying for her to go and work with Lansdorp. And, so Maria has so many positive things to say about Bollettieri's, but Bollettieri's is an academy. And Robert doesn't, his thing is he didn't believe in the academy. He believed in one-on-one with... I
have a clip for that as well. Let's listen in.
Yeah.
Develop is one-on-one, not an academy, and one-on-one with somebody and hitting ball after ball after ball. That's how you develop. Yeah. Not by hitting 10 balls and then say, that's good for the day.
Yeah, again, thank you again for this interview for Ken Thomas. This is great. I highly recommend everybody watches it, listens to it. It's on YouTube. It's called Robert Lansdorp, Tennis Coach Interview, one of the greatest coaches of all time, under the YouTube channel Radio Tennis Podcast.
Yeah, we can certainly put it in the show notes or however that goes with... at the end of a podcast. I don't think we really have show notes, do we?
Show notes soon to be. We'll get it done.
GreatBase Tennis, the amateur hour. With that, we should have a word with our sponsor. Oh, we don't have a sponsor. Here's a Lansdorp quote: "I do not teach a flat ball." People say, "Well, he just taught a flat ball," and no, but he goes on, and people will put words in someone like Robert's mouth that that he never. A guy like that so successful, he's not going to use the word never. But never loop a ball. But he will say that's what's going to win the 10s and 12s. But you got to drive the ball. Charlie Hollis was Laver's coach, and in a way, actually, this boy I was feeding balls with today spent 8 years working with David Squire, an Aussie who lives in Germany, and David Squire was fortunate enough to be taught by Charlie Hollis, and it's like, okay, tell me how that worked. But Charlie Hollis too, that, gruff and rough, he wasn't, what's Jim Lair say that pillows and
Marshmallows?
Pillows and marshmallows. You had to skip rope 1,000 times every day or you didn't get the lesson. And it was the parents and the coach, like the old days, working together. Hey, the kid, and, Square tells a story that he was just making the noise with the rope, and his mother came out. He was busted, and she took him to the lesson and said he doesn't get a lesson this week. But he had to go to the lesson and skip 1,000 times. This is Robert on himself, which again reminded me of Charlie Hollis. The kids know I'm not messing around. Obviously, they're intimidated. So I will make you pay. I will make you vomit. Puke was his word for the most part. So he wouldn't sugarcoat things. He would kick people out. Pete Sampras shared his lesson with Stella and said that he had mixed feelings about the lesson he would have. He'd be very excited to go, but also fearful of going. Fearful because of how hard you would work. With this is Sampras on. This is an article on tennisplayer.net. John Yandel. This is Sampras's words. Robert was no nonsense. He was a drill sergeant, not flashy. He had no secrets on technique. He had a gruff manner, big guy, 200 plus pounds, outspoken, brutally honest. And then he did say that his honesty probably hurt him in some ways, because he was not politically correct. And this is again Sampras, loner, did things his own way. He taught clean strokes, fairly flat, economical. Sampras said that he learned the hard way with a wooden racket. Robert, transparent, did not hide his feelings. If he was upset, you knew he was upset. He figured out one's heart. He figured out if they were tough enough psychologically. Again, this is Sampras said, I was excited for each lesson, but I was nervous and fearful at the same time because I knew I had to perform in the lesson. And it was a relief when the lesson was over. With, one of the things with us is, people come to us and they can't hit the ball. We film them and they can't hit the broadside of the barn. They tell us they want to play college tennis. And it comes back to like Robert talking at that function in New York City, the old Roosevelt Hotel, and going, what are you thinking, for Christ's sakes? Jesus. The kid's hanging on the racket like it's a frying pan. And we've been here a little over a year at this beautiful place up in the mountains. We've had people from over 14 countries and 24 states. We've had a lot of visitors. And you can't serve, you can't serve. What do you got to do? So, say the ground strokes, the bread and butter of tennis, which turns into If you got solid groundies, you got solid returns. You got solid groundies, you can pass, you can approach. And that 20 balls back and forth. And then you got to move the way he's feeding the ball. You had to adjust to Robert. Robert wasn't going to adjust to you. But at the same time, if you do your homework and you look at clips, there's, again, him tossing balls to really young kids. And so he had a track record. He was developing tennis players. And, it'd be interesting for people to know this, is that, Braden had great respect for Lansdorp. That, as Vic really knew the game. But the positive is that for when Lansdorp started, I mean, it's like Brian Teacher. Lansdorp, I heard him say he had, maybe that's on this particular interview that our listeners could hear. Ken Thomas asking, he talks about Brian Teacher. Brian Teacher, he won the Australian. He also played at UCLA. Great player. And Lansdorp goes on about how good his first volley was. And with that, Vic told a story about Brian Teacher, is his hand was a little bit too close to a continental. And Vic used to always say, have the kid sign a release. If you give the kid a lesson and the kid doesn't want to change their forehand or backhand. And that was Vic. I mean, that, I would say that in that sense that, not to put myself in the category of Braden or Lansdorp, but I'd be more towards Lansdorp. Or, where Vic, if someone didn't want to change it, he wouldn't be cracking the whip. But he said, sign a release. Sign a release. And he had Brian Teacher do that. I am not hitting the forehand the way Vic Braden told me to hit the forehand. With, and that goes back, I mean, he might have been 10, 11 years old. With, let me go on here.
How about I play one more clip?
One more?
Here?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids don't rally anymore.
Yeah.
We used to rally back and forth, go on the court for an hour and just hit balls.
Yeah.
Actually, like you play a point and move around and hit. They don't do that anymore. They don't do that anymore.
It's different.
What is actually interesting, because of the virus, more people started hitting against the backboard. And that's one of the greatest ways of developing, you learn to have patience and everything, timing. Yeah, but now they do it, but they never did that before.
The backboard never misses, does it?
Right.
It never misses.
With coming back to Sampras, and then make a few comments on that, the backboard rallying. So with Sampras under this article, tennisplayer.net, John Yandel, that Sampras said Robert had a sharp eye for talent. He shared a story. He goes, he asked me to come and join him one day to hit with a kid. And he said, years later, I'm watching, and it was Sharapova was winning Wimbledon. And, Robert said, hey, this kid's going to be good. So on that, he talked about rallying. I heard a coach say one time, you want to, as a college coach, you want to recruit players that they just love to hit a half hour cross courts and hit a half hour down the line. I know we were just at beautiful Baylor University, and those players have a key to those indoor courts. And it's like, okay, Friday night, Saturday night, the toughest place to be professional is a college campus, but just over and over and over again. I think that's gone away. People just wanting to rally. One thing about backboards, you got to find a backboard. It's not a very safe place to go. Behind the grocery store, it's a good place to find I've taken many kids. These two kids tell a story that I was traveling with them to tournaments, and it would rain, and but I would drive around, and so I'm accompanying them. Not that I'm big bad guy, but you don't see a little young kid go off on their own, ride their bike, and go hit behind the grocery store. They might get abducted, but you got to find a wall to hit against. And here's some things from Elliot Telscher. Robert was a genius on how he fed tennis balls. So coming back to just, if this is one goal for this podcast, is, I'd say there's more than one, but how you talk to a kid, to be very honest, I mean, just the Lansdorp 20, running kids side to side, pounding balls, feeding the ball, So Elliot, Robert was a genius how he fed balls. He would, cut the ball, drive the ball, top the ball, the volume of balls. So the speed of the feed, the intervals, heavy topspin, heavy slice, bunches for players to end up on balance, but then off balance. One thing you can do when you get a kid really tired, they're really moving, then feed balls to them. They're just exhausted, but feed balls to them. So catch your breath while I feed you these easy balls. You just hit on balance. One thing when kids are really exhausted, they're going to collapse on their serve after a really long rally. So, you have to be super fit. Vince Lombardi, fatigue makes cowards of us all. With, your lungs need to be like trash cans. So you treated everybody the same. There's one thing about Carleen Bassett, who I spent time with. Her and her husband own a tennis academy. It's now Chris Everett's. And Carleen Bassett on Nick Bollettieri. Best junior coach. That's what she said. Best junior coach in the world, but the worst pro coach in the world. And, she's obviously being sensationalistic, but the reason she said that is when a lot of the juniors, when the top juniors at Bollettieri's years ago, they're on scholarship. And the way he spoke to them. But then when they turned pro, they were the ones that had the money. So, but that's one thing, again, with Robert. It didn't matter whether they had already made it on the pro tour or not. Jeannie Bouchard. There's clips on YouTube with Jeannie, the Canadian player, was really hot for a year or two. Had a great summer. Reached the Wimbledon final, I believe. She got to be 7 in the world. And but in my mind, having watched him teach privates, is that he was a little bit out of his element when he's at Wimbledon, and he's not at his private court. A public park court didn't matter, but with thousands and thousands of balls, multiple grocery carts, and I think you got an excerpt on that as well about being a touring pro.
Yeah,
the worst job in the world. Before you play that, I think Julian Krinsky. Julian has a very impressive tennis background himself, but he goes, coaching on the pro tour wasn't for me, and he just crosses his arms like this and leans against the fence. Basically the term shag balls is that, and there's a lot always positive. I think, people should have a vision on that picture on, say, a Leighton Hewitt when he would have 30 minutes to practice. And he'd have 2 people shagging balls for him. He would not stop for 30 minutes. And, this is so that people learn, how did Jimmy Connors practice? He just went out nonstop. But yeah, why don't you play that segment on being a touring pro?
Yeah, I got it right here.
But I was the first guy that traveled with a player. I was the only guy that traveled with a player that was not related to the player. And that was with Tracy. I went to Wimbledon with Tracy. And that's how I started traveling with Tracy. Just to keep her game fine-tuned. Yeah. Now they have, I don't know how many people. Yeah. I don't like a traveling coach job. I hate it. I can't stand it. It's worthless to me.
Yeah, touring pros certainly it has its place, but let's back up and have him talk about development.
Yeah, here's one more clip on him talking about developing players.
Yeah. And I still don't know how it was possible. I just worked. I just did my best, making everybody who are the best player. Yeah. That's all I want. All I wanted to do is develop. Yeah.
No, it's great. With Robert, age 7 to 14 is most important. Here's something. It's almost impossible to change a kid's grip, especially if they're over the age of 12. The USTA is wrong for, or any federation, for taking a player away from their coach. Certainly, I know that Martin Blackman. I know that the USTA's tried to make efforts in this country to keep that bridge between the junior coach and the player. Also, I think also when they go to college. I mean, many times once the player goes to college, we never hear from the coach that we hear from almost daily on the recruiting side of things. You mentioned Stephanie Rahe. Stephanie Rahe, she started with Jim Verdick. She grew up very close to San Bernardino, where Redlands is, where Verdick, one of our pillars, was for a long time. And then later as a pro, she went back and she worked with Jim Verdick. But back in those days, I mean, there was a lot of similarities between coaches. It wasn't, I'll go to this coach and that coach. I mean, a forehand's a forehand. I mean, you had to obviously get organized, have a ready position, as I said earlier, have a unit turn. She got to be number 10 in the world. It was a long, long list of players. Like a Melissa Gurney, you got to be 17 in the world. Robert tells a story on that tape about 4 girls, Gearney, London, Rahe, and McGregor. They still have the tournament in Memphis for the 18-year-olds, the 8 national clays. They all 4 were in the semifinals. And they all, the same 4 girls, were in the doubles final with 148 national championships and 38 majors. But coming back to development, that, Robert, the way he went about things, it wasn't like he had an elevator ride. He just, I used to tease people and say in 1977, I really helped Borg get where he was going because I was at Boca West Youth practicing. And I just, next thing I know, I got a tap on my shoulder and I had to get out of the way so Borg could exit the court. So that year I helped Borg to where he was going. I mean, it's crazy enough, but it's amazing how many times you meet someone and say, yeah, I worked with Serena. I mean, it's just like how many people worked with Serena. It's interesting. I never knew this until doing a little homework that he actually traveled to Europe with Vitas Gerulaitis at one point. In my mind, it would have been better if Vitas could have got the Robert discipline. I used around Mr. Hopman so much too when he was a young kid, Gerulaitis. But if he just had that weekly private lesson, that's what players really need. So certainly Robert, it's like when I was at the Davis Cup tie in '85, it wasn't like he was uncomfortable, but that where Robert was at his best was pumping out balls and getting kids to really become players. Here's some comments from on Davenport, from Davenport. Doubles, I mean, she won 3 majors with 3 different partners. One player we worked with, Karina Morari, we have a clip on our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, called All the Way to Wimbledon. And she was a really, really good player. We worked really more with Alvin, her dad, and she had a reset swing on the backhand. And for our listeners, she got to be 28 in the world. She only played 2 national tournaments. So there's on this tape, Roberts says to young Lindsay Davenport, "How did you win the Swiss Open on red clay?" And she just talked about how hard she hit the ball. There's video of Robert being on a court with Davenport's son. She married into the Leach family, so grandfather passed away, but he coached at USC, and the brother-in-law, Ricky Leach, I don't know how many majors he has. I'm going to guess he's got 7 playing doubles. But Lindsay really, for the most part, served and stayed back. But she just banged the ball big, had a big serve, big return, big off the first ball off the ground. But Jagger, who's recently won some ATP points, and how I got tuned into his game, one of our visitors, we were watching the Australian Junior, and now there's so much there's so much tennis. It's amazing what you can watch. So we're watching young Jagger Leach. And the grip is further over than I would think of as a Lansdorp grip. But also too is that, he's playing, playing one up, one back doubles. He's having success, but I just look at that and go, how can that be? With, I guess, it's like, well, a lot of people even at that level think, well, the game has evolved and you can play one up, one back. And but I heard Lindsay Davenport, I heard it directly, where she said, in my family, they don't even allow me to talk about doubles. Here's a gal who's won 3 majors, but because of the Leach family. But the Tracy Austin, some comments on her from Robert. Crazy competitive. Probably the most competitive person I ever worked with. Says she was humble. He was humble as well, because he said that when she first became number one, he goes, I had never worked with a number one player before. And so he's just very honest. It was not Rocky One. Not only does he sound like Rocky, but a line from Rocky One. You got pretenders and contenders. I don't think that Robert had a pretentious bone in his body. He did say that he almost changed her to a one-hander. Austin on Robert. So demanding, perfectionist, a realist, always use targets. How many out of 10? How many out of 20? He's always counting. If you work with Robert Lansdorp, I think this is key, is that you knew when you hit short. You would be reprimanded. And again, there's a lot with Tracy Austin podcasts, and there's a lot of content, lots of yelling and incapable whispering. With one of her first lessons, she was gagging, deprived of oxygen, and she said she thinks she was 10, and this is an amazing story because he had no sympathy. He said, next time bring a bag, if you're going to vomit. But the mother was there. And the mother used to go to the lessons. And there's a famous story about Jean Austin with John. And she sat courtside, and, a family of 5. The father was a nuclear scientist, MIT grad. So, they were certainly a middle-class family, but you're paying for lessons for 5 kids, right? Or whatever it is with expenses, getting kids to go here, there, around the world for tennis. Austin alluded to the cost of lessons and having one a week. But John Austin took a lesson, and Robert didn't say one word, just fed balls. Mrs. Austin approached him after and said, Robert, well, the lesson, you didn't say one word. And he goes, that's the lesson. I go, last lesson, he didn't listen to me. This lesson, I didn't say one word. But that's where, so Gene Austin, I think people get a picture of this where Robert's giving this 10-year-old girl the gears. He's just running her, no sympathy. And, the idea that Mrs. Austin didn't bat an eyelash. And the same thing with the story that I heard is that then Gene Austin had thought that was a great lesson, where he didn't say anything. Here's something that I heard from Jim Lair, that Robert gets a phone call, and he answers it like Rocky Balboa. He doesn't know who's on the other end, just like when I met him. Who the hell are you? So he's listening to this gentleman on the phone. He goes, well, there's 3 of us, and we need a partner. We'd like to bring you in, give you 25%. And he thought it was 25% of this junior program, but it was 25% of the club. And so Jim Laird said that because of that, Robert Lansdorp, that's why he could talk to people the way he talked to people. And I think the world of Jim Laird, but I don't, that's not a valid story to me, because to me, it wouldn't matter whether he owned the club or he didn't own the club. He was just, a straight shooter, just going to tell you the way it is. The only thing about Sampras too, back in those days, is that the pediatrician, Pete Fisher, with Mr. Sampras went to the lessons, but Pete Fisher took young Pete Sampras to lessons. I think a guy like Larry, was it Easley? I remember watching him teach tennis. Wrong. I'd be mispronouncing his name, but Fisher would take him to different people in the area to get different opinions. I don't think people were as possessive as they are now. You're in our academy, like you take a private lesson. I'm going to see what this person has to say about my forehand or my backhand. There are definitely differences, and I think that's a problem. That people, they look for the differences. Rumor is more exciting than fact. If you look at film, you'll see Robert, demonstrating the volley where, you lead in with the edge, the racket faces open. Jeannie Nation, who won the NCAAs back in the day, she started to work for Vic Braden. So she was somebody who, a little younger than me, but I saw her one time at a WTA event. She was working as an administrator for the WTA years and years later. So she came in, she had just finished playing college, and she wasn't going to try to pursue pro tennis, but she was going to work for Vic. And there was a few things that I remember going, okay, this could be a tight match, but the guys are giving me the gears, the guys on the staff, that she was going to beat me. So we play a match, but that, so I was, curious to say what was different with Vic. Vic taught private lessons, and Vic had so much success. But the personality, the presentation, but one thing that was different was same thing with on the volley with Jeannie Nation, the volley with Robin Anderson, who played at UCLA. So I'm out at UCLA, and I remember talking to Stella, and she said, well, Robert, this is how he taught the volley. And people have to realize that people go on and people evolve. And I think certainly people who if they really listen to what we have to say, they know that we really respect Vic Braden. But I was in the office, and Gene Austin, Tracy's won the US Open. And Gene Austin asked Vic, what do you think of Roy Emerson being Tracy's coach? And of course, Roy Emerson's a great guy anyway. So Vic, he goes, oh, Roy's a great guy, the Aussie background, the experience, the hard work. And so, he gave a green light, a very positive green light for Roy Emerson to be the coach. And he did coach her for a short period of time. But as after the conversation, so I'm just with Vic, and he goes, Roy won't be able to hit her. Roy will not be able to help her with her serve. But people have to really listen. He goes, he won't be able to help her with serve, because when I was coaching her, I didn't know this and I didn't know that. And, Tracy, it was amazing that she did so well, and she didn't have the best serve. I mean, she set the hand on the swing and a slight regress palm up. But Vic, through his work with getting aerial and how the serve's formulated, where the shoulder goes forward first, and people study her content, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 180 degrees. People will make the mistake that, oh, it was all Braden. It wasn't all Braden. Is that, how's it go? It takes a village to raise a child, but people won't tell you where the village is or how to get there. But yeah, there's a few things with, just firsthand knowing, like, say, a Robin Anderson, who she was one in the country sent to us because she didn't hit a very good backhand. And we have it all documented on film. And so actually it was Robin's a very shy gal, and she, Rance Brown, the assistant coach, and Stella, he said, let's look at film of Pete volleying, because Robin had the experience of hitting with Pete a few times. So they looked at film, and how Pete would just get that racket face square at the hit and just drive forward. You know, or I think it was Vilander, it might have been Courier. One of those two guys said, no one will ever volley like that again. And they might be right. You know, people are taught to have a strong continental grip, and people for the most part don't get very good information on the volley. I had a former student send me some film this past week on volleying technique, and it wasn't very good. You know, but it was like, well, here's at least a video where people are talking about the volley. It's difficult to find on YouTube. You can find all sorts of clips on how to hit a forehand. You have one more clip?
I have one more clip. I do.
Let's listen to one more. We'll wrap it up here.
Go ahead, buddy.
Well, my daughter Stephanie gave me a surprise birthday party for my 75th birthday, okay?
Yeah.
And there were about 150 people there. A lot. Maria was there with her boyfriend then, Dimitrov, and whatever. And when the people thanked me, they didn't thank me for a great backhand or great forehand or anything like that. And I was surprised. They all thanked me for making him a tougher person, to show him what discipline was, to show him concentration, to show him, and even people that were there that were not great tennis players thanked me because it helped them in their business, whatever they did. And I thought I never go out, and that's not my job, but that's what I do, I guess. Yeah. You know, I make them so mentally tough. And some people said that sometimes the lesson was more difficult than playing a match because I put so much pressure on them, constant pressure, you know, and I was very good at that. Yeah. I was very good in working a person and making him want to do better. You know, I would tease him. I would play him points, and I'd cheat him. Joyce got a spank. Joyce is the only guy from all my hundreds of students that got a spanking. Yeah. Because he was arguing with me, and I go across the court. I asked the dad, "Can I give your son a spanking?" He goes, "Sure." I said, "I went over there, whacked him one." I said, "Get out of here." And so I hear him saying outside the court, "Oh, I hate that guy. Yeah, but he was still with me for another 10 years. Yeah. You know, and so I work it so they work hard for me. They all work hard for me, but they all thanked me for making them something that they didn't think they were capable of doing.
Yep. Yeah, let me make a few comments on that. One thing he mentions is my favorite definition of a coach. So a coach will bring a story out of you that you won't bring out yourself. With Michael Joyce, I remember watching Michael Joyce play as a kid. It's just these are all the connections. He's spent a lot of time, and he's currently still coaching Ashton Kruger. And that Dave Anderson, who's been on our podcast numerous times, and certainly Dave did a few things, a few weekend outings with Vic Braden, but for the most part, he agreed that he was indirectly trained by Braden. But he certainly, through his time with me, would have been indirectly fed, taught how to feed balls and how to run people from corner to corner. But yeah, Michael Joyce, Ashton Kruger. Probably's a weak word. I have to correct myself. She needs a dose of Braden as far as 130 degrees, volume potential, aggressive air margin from Jacobson. You go to the net, you win 2 out of 3. And then the thing about being fearless, she really needs to go forward. I mean, she's a world-class tennis player. She's obviously making a very good living now playing tennis. But if people watch her swing at the ball, so I'm going to guess that she was with Anderson from, 6 to 16, close to a 10-year period. But it's there's a connection between the work of Vic Braden and Robert Lansdorp and others, and Dave Anderson is that he's that developmental coach who spent those years. I just think there needs to be more of a connection. This isn't directed towards Michael Joyce, but there needs to be more of a connection between the touring coach and the touring coach and the junior coach. A few more things on Robert. He's a big proponent of Eastern grips, not to rush the process. back in his day when he first came to the U.S., you couldn't be ranked until you were 13 years old. It's really interesting. You think about his career in '79. So, he's born in '38. So he's 41 years old, and Tracy Austin's the number one tennis player in the world. I think of Welby Van Horn saying that he was so fortunate to coach Charlie Passarella became number one. Not number one in the world, but number one in the U.S. And then that is so powerful. If you work with one number one, then the door opens up for you to work with another number one. And, he did develop tennis players, but just like Charlie Hollis, Laver's coach, Hollis was known for saying if one of the students is a little chubby, he goes, I'm not going to coach you because you can't run. And, learn to run and then come back, go lose 20 pounds and then come back. One thing that Lansdorp did that Hopman would do is Lansdorp said he used $20 bills. Hopman would use $1 bills. And you could use as many as 10 $1 bills. And then he'd watch you play. And then every time you made an unforced error, it wasn't like you would add a dollar bill for every time you hit a winner, but you'd get to play points until you lost 10 points, and then just think of it as throwing money out the window. It's amazing. People really, their shot tolerance is so low. And that comes back to so many things we're touching upon. Hopefully people are getting something out of this. Ball boys, I love this. The players today are too big for their britches. Let's just let the ball boys pick up the balls. They don't have to be doing everything else. I think one thing with his daughter, Stephanie, she played at Arizona State. I remember going to the NCAAs, and I've done this with many, I remember wanting to watch, I'm going to go to Ball Terry's. I'm going to go watch Brad Gilbert's son hit balls. Just curious, how do they hit the ball? And so I was at the NCAAs. I wasn't there for the first day. So she's obviously a very good player because she's in the tournament. At that time, that would mean you're in the top 64, and there's a team tournament as well. But so I didn't get to see her play. But there's a lot of top coaches that their kids didn't become top players. That's something that I don't think is going to be mentioned that often, but it should be. His daughter became a really good tennis player. A few more things. Sampras, he started in 1978 with Robert, so you can do math on that. Robert on Sampras, his arm was so flexible. The way he turned the racket out of the top of the swing, he said his daughter thought it happened because he was so small when he was only 9 years old that, people know how Sampras would, that second serve was so good. I tell people when they're doing it, it's as if they're swinging in the same direction as the baseline. That it swung up so much that he said he never changed it, but he said he could never get anyone to serve like Pete. He said, but so you're very humble in that sense. It's like, Sampras was doing something and he didn't change it. Here's some things again, backing up to Austin, her mother. This is great for all tennis parents. Telling Tracy, there's only so much room in your brain. So try to fill it with positive feedback, positivity. Doing the homework for this, I've always telling people, Chris Evert won 125 matches a row on clay. And then doing his homework, Austin was the one that ended the streak. And she was tiny too when she first came on the scene. I understand that Tracy Austin is, check this, but still the smallest number one player. And I mean, again, could have really had a better serve. But, Vic would say that. Robert would say that. They did say that, past tense. Everett, Austin 8-7. Of course, could be Chrissy, was she at her best? Was she on her way out? But a winning record against Chris Evert. This is something that her brother Jeff said in that Sports Illustrated article. Remember, Vic used to always share the story. On one particular weekend, when she was a third or fourth grader, Tracy Austin tried to do all her homework so she could practice more. What her father thought was the cutest thing was that she would beat the best female players at the club at age 9 and then go play in the sandbox. So, but yeah, Robert Lansdorp, I hope we did his name justice. And again, coming back to just thinking tennis education with just, taking some time and going back and listening to and reading. What did Sampras say about Lansdorp? What did Telscher say? Davenport, Austin. That when you say he's an American tennis treasure, the treasure could be lost. And I do think that Daniel Coyle's book, those small pockets, those circles, is that, just like Gene Austin working the pro shop and the kids calling up and setting up matches and everything we've talked about, loving the backboard, go hit cross courts for half an hour, hit 200 balls up the middle. But the common sense of, consistency, depth, power, being fearless, you're basically the common sense approach. You're waiting for the short ball. In the rally, 3 things are going to happen. You want 3 things to happen. You want your opponent to miss, hit short, or change the direction of the ball. It's like Braden. When they change the direction of the ball, you go, hey, stupid. It can be a great thing to change the direction of the ball. If you're inside the sideline, inside the baseline, you play it at waist level and you just tag it. But if you change the direction of the ball, it's just the opposite. You're way behind the baseline. You're to the outside of the sideline and the ball's above your shoulder. And, if you see it, you can't unsee it. And then once you see it, you have the eye for it. But I think you could wrap it up with a summary. But I think really the Lansdorp 20, if people say, okay, I'm going to make that part of every private lesson. Just feed balls, how many you can hit deep. And then, not to sugarcoat it. It is what it is. If you can't hit 20 balls in a row, you don't. If you have a weakness in your game, you have a weakness in your game. It has to be addressed. But telling it like it is. But I guess one thing I could end by saying is, who the hell are you? What do you have? Any closing comments?
Yeah, just appreciation for Lansdorp. I listened to a couple of things that you had sent me in my own preparation for this podcast, and the inner voice. I feel like how did he develop so many number one players? And as we had mentioned many times, is the inner voice that he gave players. The discipline, the willingness to work hard, that work ethic. And we get a lot of players that come here and to work on their technique and to work on this is how you hit the ball. And a lot of the times, and it's really all about character. Yes, we can help you hit a forehand, a backhand. And we say that's technique is the easy part. However, the character is really what's going to get someone down the line. You can see it in the men's game and the women's game, at the top, again, at the impact point, 95%, the pros are the same. But how they get there is all up to how they were brought up and the work ethic of just the quantity of balls hit and the inner voice for them to just keep getting out there, keep putting hours in and outworking people on the court. So there's, Lansdorp was an amazing coach for developing that. Just no special sauce, no secret sauce. Just how many balls can you hit? Can you stay consistent? Like he says, concentration. Developing that inner voice is what I want to end with. And listen to him. I'd recommend again listening. Thank you, Ken Thomas, for that for the podcast on YouTube for those clips. I'd listen to it once again for everybody listening. Find it on YouTube again, Radio Tennis Podcast. Give it a listen, another listen as well, and another one and another one. So many great lessons from there to learn, and that's my closing comment. I hope that helped. I hope everyone enjoyed this podcast.
Oh, that's good. It's like Roger Bannister when he broke the 4-minute mile in 1954. Fact checker, 1954, and I think a half dozen people broke it within the same year. If you think you can, you can. It's so difficult to change the way people think, but I think I would guess that when people rocked up to work with Robert Lansdorp, it was like, this is what it's all about. I mean, the history, the environment at that time is what it's all about. It's all about simplicity, hard work, guts, and again, it was done with a lot of times just a 1-hour private lesson, and I do think the kids today get lessoned out, and it's really a lot of times he would call it an academy ball, and people staying back and looping, and there's a lot to be said about one-on-one. I do think that it's a problem where today people will take a private lesson every day. And it's like, really? Are you kidding me? Every day? You have to have a money tree in the backyard for that. And that's just not healthy for tennis. But anyway, Robert Lansdorp, just his voice. And if I were to have an academic setting now where I was training teachers and I could give them a grade, I would say, okay, just from this, just come up with, there's the Lansdorp 20, but try to come up with 20 points from this podcast. And that'd be very easy to do. But 216 in the books. Yvonne, thanks for all your help. Everybody, thanks for listening. The Tennis Treasure Chest. Hopefully there's some golden nuggets from this one.
Oh, for sure. Thank you, everybody.
Adios, amigos.